With the start of the new Team Rocket Takeover in Pokemon Go, there are new lineups and encounters from Team Rocket battles. And in this video, I will be going through the Team GO Rocket battles that you want to prioritize to get the best Pokemon, and I'll go through the ones that you can avoid so you can save yourself some time and effort. So firstly, the normal type grunt that is identified by the line, normal does not mean weak, can get you an encounter with either Shadow Teddiursa, Stantler, or Glameow. And of these, Teddiursa and Stantler can both be shiny. Shadow Teddiursa has the most meta relevance because Shadow Ursaluna in the Master League is ranked 38 and it is ranked 36 in its regular form. It's also worth noting that it does want legacy move high horsepower to be at its best. From the flying type grunt that says battle against my flying type Pokemon, you can get an encounter with Shadow Starly, Staravia, Gligar, which can be shiny, and the new Shadow Pidgey. Firstly, Shadow Starly and Staravia are good encounters because Shadow Staraptor is a top 5 flying type attacker. Shadow Gligar is one of the best Pokemon in the Great League, being ranked 4, and its evolution Shadow Gliscor is ranked 28 in the Ultra League. Likewise, Shadow Pidgeot is also relevant in Go Battle League, being ranked 49 in the Great League and 13 in the Ultra League. It does want legacy move Wing Attack to be at its best, which would require an elite fast TM to get. So the poison type grunt that reads coiled and ready to strike can get you an encounter with Shadow Hisuian Sneasel or Foongus, neither of which can be shiny. Shadow Foongus doesn't have any meta relevance, but it will give you 5 times the regular base Stardust when caught. Shadow Hisuian Sneasler does have relevance because Shadow Sneasler is ranked 64 in the Ultra League. For the ground type grunt, which is identified by the line you'll be defeated into the ground, you can get an encounter with Shadow Alolan Diglett, Wooper, Drillbur, or Rhyhorn, none of which can be shiny. This grunt does offer some really good Pokemon. Firstly, Shadow Wooper is good because Shadow Quagsire is one of the best Pokemon in the Great League, being ranked 9. Note that it does want legacy move Aqua Tail to be at its best. Next, Shadow Drillbur is another great encounter with Shadow Excadrill being a top 5 ground type attacker and number 3 in terms of DPS. It is also a top 5 steel type attacker and number 3 in terms of DPS for that as well. Excadrill is also ranked 98 in the Great League and 79 in the Master League. And lastly, Shadow Rhyhorn is also worth picking up because Shadow Rhyperior is the second best overall rock type attacker and 3rd in terms of DPS. It is also a top 10 ground type attacker. Shadow Rhyperior also has relevance in Go Battle League, being ranked 81 in the Master League and ranked 71 in its regular form. Again, it does want legacy move Rock Racket to be at its best in PvP and as a rock type attacker. From the psychic type grunt that says are you scared of psychics that use unseen power, you can get an encounter with either of the new Pokemon Shadow Gothita or Solosis. Unfortunately, neither can be shiny and they don't really have any meta relevance either, so you can pretty much skip this grunt. From the bug type grunt that says go my super bug Pokemon, you can get an encounter with either Shadow Scyther, Shuckle, Dwebble, Weedle, or Skorupi. Of these, only Shadow Scyther can be shiny. And starting with Shadow Scyther, it does have meta relevance because Shadow Scizor is a top 10 bug type attacker. It is better overall as a Mega, but it does have less DPS. Shadow Weedle might also be worth picking up, but to purify for Mega Beedrill because it is a top bug and poison type attacker. And lastly, Shadow Skorupi is a decent encounter because Shadow Drapion is ranked 93 in the Ultra League. For the fire type grunt that says the line do you know how hot Fire Breath can get, you can get an encounter with Shadow Chimchar or the new Shadow Darumaka. Neither of these can be shiny, but Shadow Darumaka in particular is a very strong encounter because Shadow Darmanitan is the 3rd best fire type attacker in terms of DPS. When it comes to the water type grunts, the male and the female grunts have different lineups. Both of them say the line these waters are treacherous, and the female grunt will get you an encounter with Shadow Totodile or Piplup, and the male grunt will get you an encounter with Shadow Magikarp. None of these can be shiny. Firstly, Shadow Totodile is a great encounter because Shadow Feraligatr is a top 10 water type attacker, and it's also very strong in Go Battle League, being ranked 11 in the Great League, ranked 2 in the Ultra League, and ranked 56 in the Master League. Also, Shadow Piplup is a good encounter because Shadow Empoleon is a top 10 water type attacker, and for Go Battle League it's ranked 23 in the Great League, ranked 16 in the Ultra League, and ranked 101 in the Master League. It's worth noting that both Shadow Feraligatr and Empoleon want legacy move Hydro Cannon to be at their best, and I would recommend Feraligatr out of the two. The Shadow Magikarp that you can get from the male grunt is also a good encounter because Shadow Gyarados is a strong water type attacker, although it's not as good as Empoleon and Feraligatr, but it is pretty close. Shadow Gyarados is also ranked 82 in the Ultra League and ranked 22 in the Master League. Purifying Shadow Gyarados for Mega Gyarados is also an option if you do need a water type Mega. The electric type grunt that is identified by the line get ready to be shocked can get you an encounter with either Shadow Mareep, Blitzel, or Joltik. Neither can be shiny and none of them really have any meta relevance other than the fact that Shadow Mareep could be purified to get an Ampharos, which you can then Mega evolve, and Mega Ampharos is the second best electric type Mega. Generally, this grunt isn't much of a priority. For the grass type grunt that has the line don't tangle with us, you can get an encounter with either Shadow Turtwig or Shadow Snova. Neither of these Pokemon can be shiny. Shadow Snova is actually a good encounter though because Shadow Abomasnow is ranked 41 in the Great League and 66 in the Master League. The ice Ice type grunt that can be identified by the line "you're going to be frozen in your tracks" can get you an encounter with Shadow Swinub or Shadow Snorunt. Neither can be shiny, but Shadow Swinub is of particular interest because Shadow Mamoswine is the best Ice type attacker in the game, and generally Ice is a very valuable type because there are a lot of Dragon type raid bosses and a lot of Dragon type meta Pokemon in the Master League, for example. Shadow Mamoswine is ranked 41 in the Master League and ranked 35 in its regular form. From the Fighting type grunt that reads "this buff physique isn't just for show," you can get an encounter with either Shadow Machop, which can be shiny, Shadow Hisuian Sneasel, Makuhita, Hitmonchan, Hitmonlee, and Hitmontop. Shadow Machop is a great encounter because Shadow Machamp is a top 5 fighting type attacker, and it's also strong in Go Battle League. It's ranked 44 in the Great League, 63 in the Ultra League, and 84 in the Master League. Again, Shadow Hisuian Sneasel is decent for the reasons I mentioned previously. Shadow Makuhita is also a decent Pokemon for raid attacking because Shadow Hariyama is a top 10 fighting type attacker. And lastly, Hitmontop is ranked 71 in the Great League and 91 in the Ultra League, so another good Pokemon there. For the Rock type grunt that says the line "let's rock and roll," you can get an encounter with Shadow Onyx, Cranidos, or Shieldon, none of which can be shiny. But Shadow Cranidos, however, is a really good encounter because Shadow Rampardos is the highest DPS Rock type Pokemon in the game. Also, Shadow Shieldon is a decent encounter because Shadow Bastiodon is ranked 28 in the Great League and 14 in its regular form. For the Ghost type grunt that says this line, you can get encounters with Shadow Misdreavus, Drifloon, Golett, Banette, and Dusclops. None of these Pokemon can be shiny. Shadow Golett can be a decent encounter though if you need a ground type attacker, because it is a decent ground type attacker. It's not in the top 10, but it's worth using if you haven't got anything better. Additionally, Shadow Banette doesn't really have any meta relevance itself, but Mega Banette is the second best ghost type attacker. Overall, this grunt doesn't offer a lot in the way of meta relevance, so it is one that's at a lower priority. The Dark type grunt that says "wherever there is light, there is shadow" can get you an encounter with Shadow Rattata, Houndour, and Stunky. Shadow Houndoom is a decent dark type attacker, and even better when it's a Mega Houndoom, where it is a top 5 dark type attacker. Also, Shadow Skuntank is ranked 86 in the Ultra League. So from the Steel type grunt that says "you are no match for my Iron Will," you can get an encounter with Shadow Alolan Sandshrew, Skarmory, or Ferroseed, none of which can be shiny. Shadow Alolan Sandshrew is worth picking up for Go Battle League because Shadow Alolan Sandslash is ranked 75 in the Great League and 102 in the Ultra League. Shadow Skarmory is an even better encounter for Go Battle League. It is ranked 37 in the Great League and ranked 7 in its regular form, and Shadow Skarmory is ranked 31 in the Ultra League and 18 in its regular form. When it comes to the Fairy type grunt that says the line "check out my cute Pokemon," you can encounter Shadow Alolan Vulpix, Ralts, Mawile, which can be shiny, Snubbull, Granbull, or Curlier. From this grunt, Ralts and Curlier are great encounters because Shadow Gardevoir is one of the best Fairy type attackers, and Mega Gardevoir is the best. And also Shadow Snubbull and Granbull are good encounters because Shadow Granbull is a top 5 Fairy type attacker. And lastly, Shadow Alolan Ninetales is ranked 68 in the Ultra League. For the Dragon type grunt that is identified by the line "roar, how did that sound?" you can get an encounter with Shadow Dratini, Bagon, and Gible, and both Shadow Dratini and Bagon can be shiny. All 3 of these encounters do have meta relevance. Firstly, Shadow Dratini's evolution Shadow Dragonite is a top 10 Dragon type attacker, and is ranked 66 in the Great League, 39 in the Ultra League, and ranked 9 in the Master League. It's also worth noting that Shadow Dragonair is ranked higher than Shadow Dragonite in the Great League, being ranked 38. When it comes to Shadow Bagon, Shadow Salamence is a top 5 Dragon type attacker, and it's the second best in terms of DPS. And lastly, you can get Shadow Gible, and Shadow Garchomp is a top 5 Dragon and Ground type attacker. It's also worth noting that both Salamence and Garchomp have Mega evolutions as well. So there are also grunts that don't have a specific type associated with it, but they say the line "winning is for winners," and again there is a male and a female version with 2 different lineups. From the male grunt, you can encounter Shadow Trico, Torchic, or Mudkip, and from the female grunt you can encounter Shadow Snorlax. None of these can be shiny, but they do all have some meta relevance. Shadow Trico is relevant because Shadow Sceptile is a top 10 grass type attacker, and Mega Sceptile is the best grass type attacker. Shadow Torchic is also decent because Shadow Blaziken is a top 10 fire type attacker, and Mega Blaziken is the second best fire type attacker and number 1 in terms of DPS. Mega Blaziken is also the best fighting type raid attacker. For Shadow Mudkip, Shadow Swampert is a top 10 water type attacker, and Mega Swampert is the second best water type attacker. Shadow Swampert also has relevance in Go Battle League. It's ranked 10 in the Great League and 23 in the Ultra League. Again, all of these Hoenn starters do want their legacy moves, Frenzy Plant, Blast Burn, and Hydro Cannon to be at their best. Shadow Snorlax is also a good encounter for the Master League, where it is ranked 57. So when you have a Super Rocket Radar and you're looking for Giovanni, you can sometimes run into Decoy grunts, which will reward you with a Shadow Bellsprout encounter, which can be shiny. Also, Shadow Victory Bell is a top 10 poison type attacker. So when it comes to the Team GO Rocket leaders and their new lineups, Cliff can get you an encounter with Shadow Machop, Arlo can get you an encounter with Shadow Cacnea, and Sierra Terra will get you an encounter with Shadow Trapinch, all of which can be shiny at a rate of 1 in 64, which is higher than the shiny rates for grunts, which is around 1 in 256. Out of these, Shadow Machop is the most relevant, with Shadow Machamp being relevant as a raid attacker and in Go Battle League. And lastly, battling Giovanni will get you an encounter with Shadow Groudon. This cannot be shiny, but it does have some strong meta relevance. Shadow Groudon is the second best ground type attacker in terms of DPS, and it is ranked 21 in the Master League. It's worth noting that Groudon is better in its regular form for Go Battle League, and it's better in its primal form for raid attacking. But I wouldn't recommend purifying your Shadow Groudon because it could be a while before you can get another one again. It's also worth noting that in all instances, Groudon does want Legacy move Precipice Blades to be at its best, and for the Master League it also wants Legacy move Fire Punch. So there are also a lot of really strong Pokemon that you can get from field research tasks. If you want to know which tasks can get you these strong Pokemon, then check out this video next.